Hey guys, Movie Fan here to talk to you about something that I've never truly discussed in full. Now, if you've been watching my show for a while, you know that I'm a huge Power Ranger fan. I got t-shirts, I got, the Megazord toys, I got all kinds of stuff, even some good collector's items. And, well, surprisingly, I got very few of the comic books. And there's quite a good reason for this. It's because that I have never seen the comic books to be canon to the series. However, I've never fully discussed why I don't think they're canon to the series at all. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, it's no secret. When it comes to the series, I adore it. I practically worship it. It's one of the greatest shows to ever come out of the 90s. But with the comic books, I don't talk about them much. In fact, one thing I definitely have mentioned about was the legendary Shattered Grid series and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover, which, like everybody else, I hope one of these days they bring that to life in some way. But other than those two right there, you got the other comic books. Like there, you got the story talking about when Kimberly came back and she said why she wrote Tommy that Dear John letter and all that. And of course, you got the Soul of the Dragon comic book, which says that Tommy is in fact married to Kat. Well, I'm not a supporter of that, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm just pretending that that never happened. To me, the comics are not truly canon to the series. Why? Well, it comes down to one major thing. The series pretty much went on its own, for starters. You know how it all started with Jason Trini and Zach, and then later Tommy shows up. And it all turned into a big generational thing because, it went down the line. Because after the original Power Rangers left the show, we get new Power Rangers in Turbo. And then, of course, when the original forces of evil from the Zordon era is defeated, including Zordon himself being destroyed, we end up going to Lost Galaxy where we get new enemies, new Power Rangers, and we just get a new series of Power Rangers ever since. And for me, up until about the Megaforce series, it was not a interdimensional thing. It was literally a generational thing where it just was, you got your Mighty Morphin, then you got your Zeo, then you got your Turbo, you got your Space Rangers, your Lost Galaxy, your Lightspeed Rescue, your Wild Force, and so on and so forth. It was always kind of going down the line, and Megaforce was the one to really kind of cut it off right there because that's pretty much what they had going on. They put it down that it was more of a generational thing. And these days, it's turned into a interdimensional thing, which is okay. There's really nothing wrong with that. In fact, they did talk about interdimensional stuff before. But anyway, because it was a whole generational thing, to me, that has always been and always will be the main core of the story. For the comic books, they're more like a spin off or just someone's interpretation. Like when somebody reboots a movie. Case in point, the King Kong remakes. We got the original, which is a legendary classic. We got the 1976 version. That was just somebody else's interpretation because it's set on a different timeline. And of course, you got him jumping on the Twin Towers, and they put it down that he was alive in the sequel. Then you got the Peter Jackson version, which was great, by the way, but it did have some problems. But that's for another day. Anyway, that was set in the right time frame, but as Ray Harryhausen put it was someone else's interpretation. That's the thing. With the comic books, it's always somebody else's interpretation. For instance, The Soul of the Dragon. They put it down that Tommy actually married Kat, not Kimberly, which I'm sure they got part of the idea from that Power Rangers Zeo Christmas episode. However, there's one thing wrong with it. They put it down that Zordon was still around and their grandkids were Power Rangers. And since Zordon made the ultimate sacrifice in Power Rangers in Space, obviously that is meaningless now. And that's the truth. But anyway, that's the way I see it. They're not truly canon, they're just somebody else's interpretation of what could be or what might be. Like, for instance, the comic book where Kimberly talks to Tommy and she says why she wrote him that Dear John letter. Basically, while she was in Florida, things changed. She grew up a little and she realized that trying to do a whole long distance relationship wasn't fair to him and it wasn't right. In fact, she even said that she never found somebody. She just thought it was wrong to leave him dangling on the proverbial hook. So she released him, which seemed more like the better thing to do because, the odds of her coming back were pretty much zero. So why keep him hanging like that? And you know how it is. Things change, people change, and long distance relationships, they never really do work. That's the truth. Now, I do agree with the idea of it, but again, it's just someone else's interpretation. It's a great add on, it really is, and it makes perfect sense. But again, it's just someone's interpretation. That is all. And that's the one thing that everybody always overlooks. A comic book is really just, well, a spin off or a small branch off of that proverbial tree. In fact, what most people forget, especially now, is that when comic books were made that were based off of TV shows and movies, they were not truly canon to the show that was based off of. It was just someone's interpretation of what could be. I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of the comic books really aren't canon to Power Rangers at all. At least I don't think so anyway. Now, there are a few exceptions, like the comic books that talk about Zordon before he was trapped in that time warp. That I would say is an exception because, what do we really know about Zordon's past? Not much. All we know is that he's from Eltar and that he fought Rita and she trapped him in that time warp. That's all we know. So in this case, that would be an exception because it does give an origin story to Zordon himself. That in some of the fan films, like Zordon of Eltar. But that's different because, we don't have a true blue origin story for him. At least Saban never made one, and no series has ever since. But that's the reason why this is an exception. When they don't really have an origin story, I think just about everybody has a license to come up with something. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I've actually read those comics. They're actually pretty darn good. In fact, I went to a Comic-Con recently and met David Fielding himself. And he said that he does believe that those comic books truly are canon to the series. That I can agree with. Like I said, it gives an origin story to Zordon. So that's different. That's a very big exception. And of course, the Shattered Grid series and the Ninja Turtles crossover, that is very different because, again, it's not like they're retelling the episode of Green with Evil or anything. Instead, they're just doing individual stories of a great crossover that we wish we would have had, and an idea that a lot of us definitely want to see, especially asking the question of what if Tommy did not join the Power Rangers? So those are different. But when they have stories like Soul of the Dragon, granted, they're trying to make it canon, I think, but that's just somebody else's interpretation. In fact, I do believe Saban may have had a part in it. But again, just because you have Tommy and Kat holding hands in the 25th anniversary episode Dimensions in Danger and make a comic book saying they're married doesn't prove anything, at least not to me. And even if it does prove something to somebody, I'm sorry. To me, it will always be Kimberly and never Kat. Because with Kimberly, there was some real chemistry there. There was a true blue connection. With Kat, I don't see it at all. There's just nothing. It's like puppy love at best. There's really no true blue connection going on with them. And that's why I don't support that, and I never will. And if someone tries to make a comic book where Tommy and Kim get together, good for you, and I hope to see it happen. But who knows? Maybe it'll happen sooner than you think, because there's still a lot of people who prefer Kimberly over Kat. And now you know why, to me, the comic books are not canon to the series at all, and they never will be. Now, I know a lot of people are going to strongly disagree with me on this, and that's okay. I don't mind when people disagree with me. And, if you think the comic books are canon to the series, fine. I don't care. I disagree, but that's all good. You believe what you want to believe. I'll believe what I want to believe. And we'll leave it at that. This is Movie Fan, signing off.